Mr. Secretary, this might not surprise you. I don't trust this administration and the way they use terms like terrorist. I've seen them calling American citizens domestic terrorists who are people trying to peacefully protest. The problem we have right now is the administration continues to make policies that seem to contradict their words, and yet we don't have a process in place for Congress to do its job because people are not calling folks in for these hearings and not providing the kind of oversight that we need. It is very frustrating to me that we still have a repressive regime in power in Venezuela suppressing human rights. I want to pick up on my colleague's questioning because I actually know from years of conversations with you your heart about human rights in countries like Venezuela, Mr. Secretary. And you issued a travel warning, a level 4 travel advisory from your department's website that says, right now in Venezuela, there's a high risk of wrongful detention, torture, terrorism, kidnapping, arbitrary enforcement of laws, crime, and more. And when we hear from the president that he is in charge, that you all are running this government to that extent, I have a lot of concerns when it comes to the rampant human rights violations that are persisting. Cabello is Maduro's key hardline enforcer. He's continued to intimidate and suppress Venezuelan voices. He remains in control of Venezuela's security services, the colectivos. We're seeing extraordinary examples that the constant oppression of the people is continuing as these folks are remaining in control of the country. So I just want to know what is the plan to address in a much more aggressive manner these severe human rights violations and to try to stop these armed militias. Because if we are doing things to stabilize their government, if we're turning over resources and money to the very groups that are creating these horrors, that seems to me against America's values, and it seems to me something that is should be unacceptable to Congress on both sides.
Yeah, well, absolutely. The Venezuela I described that we want to see emerge from this is one in which none of that is happening. If you think about travel advisories are us imagining worst-case scenarios. We have a duty to warn American citizens when they travel to a place that does have a history of Americans being arrested, of Americans being taken. And they may be taken by a deliberate action of a government or entity related to the regime. They may be taken by criminal gangs that control parts of that society. For example, you have these colectivos, as they're called, which basically are these armed motorcycle gangs that are allowed to act with impunity in return for their support for the Maduro regime in the past. You have the ELN and the FARC and other drug trafficking organizations, including Tren de Aragua, that are involved.
Again.
So these are real risks that we have a duty to warn Americans, because here's what we didn't want to see, and don't mean to interrupt you. We have this announcement that Maduro's been taken. All of a sudden, people conclude, oh, he's gone, let's flood over there, let's all go over there, and we could expose people to dangers.
But this is the hypocrisy that I see. At the same time that you're issuing these human rights cautions about what's going on there for Americans, you have a president that's lifting temporary protected status for Venezuelans. Many of them are individuals that have lived in our country for years, if not decades. When I hear from the Venezuelan community, I hear an outrage that at the very same time that you are affirming here that these armed militias are running around suppressing voices, we have an administration that has said very clearly that they're not only going to be lifting temporary protected status for Venezuelans living in the U.S., but instead of protecting longtime American residents, they are, quote, the administration is putting people back on deportation flights and sending them into that madness. Does that make sense to you?
Well, first of all, the travel advisories for American citizens traveling there and the threats posed to Americans. What you're describing
why lift temporary protected status?
Well, the problem with temporary protective status was it was granted to so many people in such a vast numbers so quickly without proper vetting by the previous administration that there's a real concern that there were gang members that had received TPS simply because of the nation they came from and the time in which they came. It became so big and so massive. The overwhelming majority of Venezuelans are not members of Tren de Aragua, but there were Tren de Aragua and other criminal elements embedded in the TPS system. And the numbers were so large that the administration felt it had to cancel the program in order to appropriately vet it through on the individual cases.
Excuse me, Mr. Secretary, this might not surprise you. I don't trust this administration and the way they use terms like terrorist. I've seen them calling American citizens domestic terrorists who are people trying to peacefully protest. The problem we have right now is the administration continues to make policies that seem to contradict their words. And yet don't have a process in place for Congress to do its job because people are not calling folks in for these hearings and not providing the kind of oversight that we need. It is very frustrating to me that we still have a repressive regime in power in Venezuela suppressing human rights, yet we are cooperating with them. We are funding them, and we're not calling out the ridiculousness of the violence that's going on there. At the same time, we're taking people who have lived in our country for years and years and years and sending them back into that hell where they can be targeted, where they can be abducted, where they can be held for hostage because they know they have American family members that are still here. This is a situation ripe for where we are being complicit in continuing human rights violations, and that needs to stop. And I think
just on 2 points, we're not cooperating with them to continue doing what they're doing now. We're cooperating with them to transition away from what's happening now. And as I said, we're not even 4 weeks into this thing. And if it continues to look like this in 6 months, 9 months, a year from now, if progress isn't being made, we'll have very different feelings about it. But what we're cooperating on is not the continuation of what's happening. It's a movement away from all this and transitioning ultimately to something that looks nothing like this. That's the goal. But it's been less than 4 weeks. I mean, we think we've made substantial.
The Republicans are at it again, playing a lethal game of political theater, while real lives hang in the balance. They sit in their air-conditioned hearing rooms, grandstanding about human rights abroad while systematically dismantling them here, at home. This isn't about oversight. It's about a calculated, right-wing agenda designed to demonize immigrants and weaponize the suffering of the working class for GOP talking points. The GOP logic is as twisted as it is transparent. They claim to care about the madness and torture in Venezuela. Yet they are the same architects of a Maga movement that wants to strip protection from families who have lived here for decades. They scream about American values while pushing for mass deportations that would send peaceful residents back into the very violence they condemn. It is a masterclass in conservative hypocrisy. Let's be clear, the MAGA right doesn't care about human rights. They care about optics. They use the word terrorist to smear American protesters demanding justice, yet they remain silent when corporate-backed regimes crush dissent. By attacking temporary protected status, they aren't vetting for safety. They are engaging in a racialized purge to satisfy their extreme base. They are creating the very instability they claim to hate. The conservative elite wants us distracted by fear. They want you to believe that hardworking neighbors are criminal elements so you won't notice. They are the ones robbing you of healthcare, housing, and a living wage. They fund the chaos, profit from the weapons, and then blame the victims of the fire for seeking shelter. It's a cycle of corporate-funded cruelty that serves no one but the billionaire donors pulling the strings of the GOP. While they debate the process of deportation, the common good is being auctioned off. Every dollar spent on the GOP's deportation machine is a dollar stolen from our schools and our communities. They prioritize the travel warnings of the wealthy over the survival of the poor. This is the hallmark of the American right-wing, performative outrage for the cameras, and cold-blooded policy for the most vulnerable among us. We see through the lies. We see the GOP using foreign suffering as a prop to justify their domestic crackdown. They talk about transit from violence, while their own policies ensure that the cycle of misery never ends. The Republican Party has abandoned any pretense of morality, replacing it with a loyalty to corporate interests and a desperate, failing grip on power through the politics of division and hate. We cannot stay silent while the mega machine grinds our neighbors into the dust. It is time to stand up and demand an end to the GOP's hypocritical crusade. The people see the truth, and we are organized. Join the resistance. Share this, spread the word, and let the corporate elite know that their reign of fear is coming to an end. We are the many, they are the few. Together, we fight for the common good. Resistance isn't just a hashtag, it's a necessity. The GOP thinks they can play with lives and face no consequences. They are wrong. Follow the common good for the strategies. You need to fight back against the MAGA agenda. Organize in your streets. Mobilize in your digital circles. And never let them forget that the power belongs to the people, not the corporate puppets in Washington. Rise up and resist today.